everybody, I'm Sean Robinson.
I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to Living the Line. I'm an idiot. We just recorded for about an hour and a half of really amazing conversation, and I had not hit the button to record on Zoom. So
So
we're going to do this again.
we occasionally get feedback on our videos that we're long and rambling, or that we go on too many tangents or things like that. So this is going to be an interesting experiment because we are going to hit all of the same points that we just talked about in an hour and 45 minutes, and we're going to hit all those points in less than 20 minutes. This is the Living the Line speed run edition of Metabarons. Can we do it?
We'll see.
So Metabarons is a book written by a great filmmaker Jodorowsky and drawn by an artist that I had never been aware of before, but Juan Jimenez, and quite an amazing stylist, quite a stunning stylist. And one of the first things that I was thinking when we were reading this was, where in the world did this guy come from? And it wasn't until I was done with the entire book that I went back and looked at the timetable for all of it and realized, oh, he was 49 years old by the time that he started this title with Jodorowsky in the early 1990s. So he had basically a lifetime of professional art experience at that point, working as, among other things, a comic artist, I think a storyboard artist and animator of some type. He was at least involved in the heavy metal animation. And you can see all of those things in terms of his approach to visuals and his quite stunning command of painting and color and layout and scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we talked about Inkall, one of the things you kept mentioning was scale, and I know you really like scale in Brandon's work. And so after we read the Inkall, and I was like, okay, he likes Jodorowsky's writing, he enjoyed the Inkall, he likes Moebius, like time for Gimenez, because he's the master of scale in my mind. And this opening sequence shows exactly why he's so good at it. Like, you get the meta bunker here. This is the Metabarons like little fortress, and his little robots are maintaining it while he's away, which is something I enjoy about the story, that there's always these bookends to each chapter that's the robots. But you get a sense of how he manages scale in this opening sequence, to where you have, like, here's this big thing, and it's big, but not exactly how big. And you see this little tiny bit there, and then you zoom in on that little tiny bit, and then you zoom in on that little tiny bit, and then like that little tiny bit, and you keep going, and that trains the audience to really be able to retroactively have a sense of, like, fuck, that thing is huge. And he does that all the time throughout the book. Also here it goes in reverse, where you go in and then you see things that are smaller, like, just kind of get, well, I guess it's kind of the same trick, the zoom in, and you really just get a sense of how big all these marble hills are that they're mining.
Yeah, and the story itself has a similar sense of scale in that it takes place over multiple generations. A character who is in the Inkall, the Metabaron, and it turns out there were not the Metabaron, but there are several Metabarons, and each of these people is a relative of the other. And these robots, Lothar and Tonto, are discussing the history of their master, and in doing so, basically tracing the lineage of his family through the generations and how they developed the particular things that they've developed. And these are fairly extreme. These are wildly extreme things. And you basically find out that these people are, sort of the equivalent of godlings. If you think about it in a sort of Greek context, this would be like Heracles or something, somebody who is related to a god in terms of the scope of their power, in terms of the extremity of their personality. And like the Greek gods, these are not the flawless gods. These are the gods that are more than us.
Yeah.
Are wider extremes of us. And you can see his color sense. Jimenez's color sense is just absolutely,
that's phenomenal.
good. Yeah.
And
And
his compositions, when you're talking about that kind of mythological aspect to it, I mean, he's going like pure classical composition too, just in terms of staging things and the solidity. And I think that adds to that mythological, like heroic aspect too. Like he just knows how to compose around that um,
yeah,
in an astonishing way.
you know, could be a great abstract painter, uh,
Yeah.
had he felt the need to do so. And you can just see his color sense is just quite amazing. Uh, we were discussing during our video on Cam Kennedy's use of, you know, almost like monocolor, like he'll have a section, you know, a whole location that basically takes place with one or two colors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some similarity in terms of the key color that he uses here, where we'll traverse great distances and you can tell that you're in another location because of the key colors that are used for that location.
Like here, the Golden Planet, which is in the Incal. There's a lot of stuff that's in the Incal that isn't here. Here's the Golden Throne Room that's in the Incal many times, and this is like even more of a central location in this book. They keep coming back to it, and you get that, and then you get the transition into the space stuff. So he's good at color transitions too. Like kind of okay, now I'm going to introduce here's the gold, but we'll introduce the space blue and move you along that way as well. Yeah,
And
really sophisticated.
and especially in terms of the luminescence, and you know, you get you see the amount of explosions and things that, you know, he renders. He's got a certain technique for that that always gives it the feeling of, you know, like your eyes are blown out by the explosion.
Yeah, and that's he's combining, this is a trick I learned. He's combining like a really light yellow with a either like light electric blue or light like electric purple. And that combination of equiluminant colors that are the same gray if you were to convert them to black and white, but them being contrasting color complements, yellow and purple, that will create like a sense of vibration in your eye. Like if you've seen the optical illusions that vibrate, that's what they're doing. And so that sense of vibration replaces the fact that there's no actual projected light here. Like if you get projected light in your eye, it can be intense and make your eyes like ah. You can't do that with reflected light because it's just a piece of paper, but that equiluminant effect that he uses so frequently for all of his glows, like right here, perfect example of it. It really gives a sense of luminosity to everything that he does, and his explosion effects are just amazing. But also
It,
look at his designs, like Jesus.
yeah. And the designs are, you know, self. If you flip them around, you can expect to see the same features on the other side. In other words, that they're really consistently realized from panel to panel.
Yeah,
I
his
mean,
ability to draw like a spaceship from, you know, like it will be a crowd of the same spaceship I'm not landing on. Well, here's, you know, it will be like this crowd of the same spaceship, but they're all drawn from different angles. You know, here's this same spaceship from the back. And yeah, you get the sense that he was either probably building models of these things, like physical models, or he was just that good at visualization. I'm not sure. To me, it looks like he must have had models that he was then manipulating as reference materials, but who knows? He's obviously just really good too.
yeah,
But there's a consistency in design that, like this thing here too, that he's rotating it so consistently
right.
is pretty astonishing.
And so those women that were on that panel there are this group that is attempting to bring about the androgyne figure, and one of the many manipulators that the Metabarons meet along the way of their generational swing. And you know, I said that the Metabarons have fairly extreme uh, you know, views and extreme behaviors and everything. You know, a lot of them are sort of centered around the mythological consistency with, you know, godlings, as in things that creatures that can behave as mortals dare not behave. And so you have a lot of taboos being, you know, broken by them in terms of their mating ritual, like in terms of each of the generations, the child is composed in some kind of way that is aberrant or, you know, not
Yeah, like this character here is born because his father pricks his finger and then inserts his bloody finger into his mother and then inseminates her with his blood.
Right.
There's a mother that disguises herself as her son's lover and basically rapes her own son and impregnates herself because he's like he doesn't want to continue the Metabaron, so she's like, I'm going to get a Metabaron out of you anyways and raise it, you know.
Right.
There's a father who attempts to rape his daughter. There's here's the nuns are in trying to impregnate this woman, get her impregnated by a monster. So there's definitely a lot of like sexual assault, rape, in these stories. But I think that is consistent with that mythological view, right? I mean, that's what
Yeah.
Zeus and those guys were running around disguising themselves as bulls, you
Right.
know.
And the sort of classical view of the God figure is not of a God that is perfect or a God that is above humanity, but a God that is essentially like an exemplar of humanity, that they act and behave like humans do, just more so.
Just
And
super powered.
exactly, and that's reflected definitely in the tenor of the story. You know, I also think about Greek myths too, because of course, like you have to go back there to think of the long lineage stories that take place over many generations and things like that.
Yeah.
However, you know, a Greek person, you know, encountering those stories would be familiar with all the characters, whereas this, you know, there's the density can be a little bit off-putting at first because it's self-referential. You don't know
Yeah.
who these figures are at first unless you've read the in-call, you've at least encountered one of the metabarons. So there's a certain kind of hermetic aspect to it where everything is internal and self-referential, uh, except perhaps some of the design stuff, like we said, the nuns, you know, the techno pope, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're obviously intended to look like nuns at some sense, and then other times like witches, uh,
Yeah.
and you know, the sci-fi the sci-fi environment kind of insulates the writing, I'd say, from accusations of, you know, if this was taking place in modern time, I think that we would have uh, people will be a lot more likely to be judgmental about the main characters and about the decisions that he's making, things like that.
Yeah, like a grossly misogynistic book in a sense. Like if it was just like in modern times, like this guy like trying to get a dog to rape his daughter and then like a mother
Yeah,
raping her son and like, you know, that
right.
would be completely unpalatable if that was just a down to earth like slice of life story about reprehensible people. But it does in this context, it works a little better. And just to get a sense of how reprehensible they are, like this guy just blows his kid's head off because he doesn't want his kid, you know, he doesn't want any more metabarons, and you know, the mother preserves the child and they attach someone else's head to him. And there's another one where there's these twins and they put the brain of the male into the body of the female, and just a lot of things like that throughout the book that are, yeah, rough. And then the metabarons have like these traditions that they build and then almost immediately start to break as well. But one of them is that you have to torture the child. So there's a child that gets like their legs ground off, or someone else gets their ear ripped off, you know, to see how they can handle pain. And then they also have to be trained to be the best warrior, and to prove that you're the best warrior, you've got to beat your father. And you know, that's a pretty standard, I think, mythological conceit too, the replacing of the older generation by the new. But they even work that out in here where it's like, you know, some of them don't want to do it, and there's a mystery surrounding that that's pretty interesting. And the bookend structure, we won't spoil it, but the bookend structure pays off later in the book, where there's like an actual narrative that's been running underneath the whole story the entire time, that
Right.
what at first just seemed kind of funny. And like the robots, when they talk about like sex and stuff, it'll be like, I don't know, like his throbbing insemination tube will enter her wet DNA collecting you know, like this
Yeah.
really mechanical descriptions of sex or human emotions that are very funny. But then that turns into something more serious by the end of the book.
Yeah, we have it's essentially the C3PO R2D2 trope of if only I had tear ducts I could cry, or if only I had feelings, you know, type of reductionist robot talk. But here it takes it to such absurd levels that's very delightful. And every time you have it, you have a repetition of it and an exaggeration of it further.
Oh, here we go. Here's the one. So without even knowing his name, the female allowed the male to insert his telescoping bio appendage into her moist, hollow puboglandular network. Hormones make humans completely crazy. And like, I don't know, sometimes I kind of look at human behavior that way. Like even sex at some points, you just take like an objective view of it and you're like, what a strange behavior. And
Right.
it's always fun to have like that character that views things from outside of our biological impulses and can just describe them
Right.
literally.
Totally.
So I enjoy that. But
by the way, and I'm many people have pointed out that that comes straight from Star Wars is the easy one to point to, but that comes straight out of the Hidden Fortress, which is in some ways a model for Star Wars, which is a movie directed by Akira Kurosawa and written by him, and two servants who follow around all of these rich people essentially comment and undercut the rich people. They're the outsiders looking in that situation. And you could see that as a sort of model for that. But yeah, them being robots obviously causes different types of exaggeration.
yeah. And that similarity to Star Wars, I think that there's another big similarity here that did give me kind of an access point to the book, is that this whole thing kicks off because the Metabarons come out of a clan of people that mine this marble, and then there's a precious resource on that planet that they use to move the marble around because it makes things float, and there becomes an intergalactic battle over that precious resource, and that's very derived from, and I think this whole series, the Incal, all of that, it's known that it was derived from him not getting to make his version of Dune, and then he took those same themes and played them out. So I don't think it's any coincidence that you have like a precious resource political battle basically as the kicking off point for this. It goes far beyond that, and I think it becomes ultimately a story about he's trying to lay out, I think, like the path to enlightenment in this book, and there's these like stages of dualities that the characters go through, and the kind of characters inhabit poles of certain things. Like you have Steelhead, who's the one where his father blows his head off, but the mother preserves the body, and so they have to go get ahead of like the best poet in the universe, and you combine the warrior and the poet together, and there's the male and the female, and he's kind of combining these things that are seen as opposite ends of poles, and putting them together and kind of suggesting that that's where we all need to be headed towards. But I don't think there's much practical advice for how to make that suggestion work. It's just a suggestion of, if we could accomplish this, the world would be better. And it's like, yeah, we all know that, but no one's ever told us how to pull that off.
Yeah, and the pole of opposites, the bringing together the opposing things is a commonality that's shared with all of his movies, and sort of the mysticism that he's definitely influenced by. And you look at like the turn of the century, like Satanists and other types of mystics who attempted to bridge, what we're missing in life is evil, what we're missing in life is this, what we're missing in life is that. You can sort of see the mystical underpinnings of it. But like I said, I think he benefits from the unrecognizable locale in terms of making some of those ideas more palatable. And
yeah, like something we mentioned in the longer version of this is, Aleister Crowley kind of has this idea in his work that you have to debase yourself as far as you can to also achieve the heights. Like you can't experience the heights without the lowest lows. And I think there is a sense of that in Jodorowsky. Like you've got to go through your father blowing your head off, or your mother like hiding herself in your lover's body and raping you. You've got to go through those awful lows to reach the heights. And that's something that's always made me uncomfortable about Jodorowsky, is those uncomfortable things show up in everything he does. and he seems really engaged in that, in a very sincere way, and that makes me uncomfortable. But yeah, I mean, he's trying to unpack, or he's trying to create a story that has the same amount of truth packed into it as Greek mythology.
Right.
And I don't know if he accomplishes that or not, but it's an impressive attempt. And when you get an artist like Gimenez on board with you, or an artist like Moebius, then yes, like you can't ignore that attempt, right? I mean, this is a hell of a piece.
Well, and it starts to, that's where, to me, the mystical element starts to sing, is when it's married to a level of craft that is just, mind-boggling, incomprehensible. It's so intimidating to me. The composition, the color sense, the actual technical side of the painting, the storytelling and the use of scale. I mean, it's just, he's got everything.
And then the design, like the costume design, just the vision for like what that looks like. Like, Lord knows what Jodorowsky described, but there's a scene where they're dropping, or here's like, okay, you're bursting through to another universe entirely. There's like this crack that happens in reality, and you're going into another universe, and like, okay, now go draw that. And he comes up with this, I'm sure he was telling him this dimensional gateway, but it's this sexual image of like this cosmic ejaculation coming through on the other side. And to ask someone to draw that, and then to have them pull it off like that, it's like, Jesus, like, how do you even start visualizing that? So I mean, Gimenez is just, he's a monster. Who would you like, if you could get one artist for your book? Would you take Moebius or Gimenez?
Depends on the subject of the book, I think. If it's a space opera, Gimenez, no question.
If it's more humorous, Moebius.
Yeah, or if it took place in a city, if it's sort of more ground level. Just in terms of those two works, contrasting them, I think that, Moebius convinces me all the time that somebody's sitting in a cafe in a chair, and the acting is a little bit less extreme as well. When I read the Metabarons, I was interested in hearing you in the longer form, non-extant video. You discussed how Jodorowsky wanted to have Orson Welles be in his Dune adaptation. When I think about Orson Welles and like sort of what, as an actor, that is, and what his advantages were, you essentially have somebody who is always able to project a restrained kind of power. Somebody who gives you the feeling that they are withholding the full level of power. And he got criticized as kind of being a ham from an acting standpoint, or sort of one note, because this was like the thing that he was able to do. His voice gives him an authority. His voice and his size and his intensity gave him an authority that always communicated, and I think that there's a similar kind of thing happening with the Metabarons here. It makes sense to me, the connection, because you don't want to sit down and have breakfast with any of the Metabarons.
No.
You don't want to meet them at a cafe. Like, there's a level of intensity. Maybe I made a mistake in saying restrained intensity, because these guys aren't restrained by anything. But everything is sort of that over the top, so big.
Well, and that extends to the artwork, like that personality you're describing. Like, when you get a page like this, that's what it is. It's just massive and imposing. And I do think Jodorowsky, one of the, we're like, how does he get like all of these, like, where are you finding all of these just absolutely amazing artists? And I think one of the things is he really knows who's the right fit for the right thing. Like Inkall is lighter and a little bit more humorous, and you need that kind of Jack Davis rubbery aspect that Moebius gets, and then here everything's just intense and solid and like powerful and huge and masculine, and even the women are kind of like the way Gimenez draws women, they're very like thick and sturdy and strong, that's like his preference, so it makes total sense to me. But to me, like in terms of, I always go to Moebius for like having such a unique and compelling vision and being like the guy who set the tone for modern sci-fi. But when I look at Gimenez, I almost think, man, this guy's having even more robust imagination. I know some of the designs are coming from Moebius, some of the designs in here, but I just can't help but think like this guy is about as peak sci-fi artist as you can get.
I agree.
You couldn't ask for more. So it's a fascinating book. As with all Jodorowsky stuff, I'm always a little bit unsure about where he's going with it all. I know he's got this worldview behind it, but I usually just kind of have to enjoy the wildness. That's my sense of Jodorowsky, is like it's just going to be wild, it's going to be weird, it's going to be grotesque at some points, and you're going to get just some of the coolest art you've ever seen, no matter what project you're picking up of his.
All right, well, I hope that people will pick up this collected edition of Metabarons, and I would definitely recommend this edition versus the the floppy comics that came out in the early 90s in translation, in terms of the reproduction and everything. Not really comparable at all.
And this one also has 2 short stories that I think one of them's never been published before, or at least hasn't been translated, I think, where it's like a retelling of a scene from the Inkall. Like he says that he realized that the entire Inkall book was just a dream that John DeFool had, and so he had to go like rewrite one of the sequences to actually jive, and so that's what this is. And then there's a story about how they get this bird symbol on their chest that gives them their power. So that's like a cool extra where you get some more stuff in there. And while you're at it, make sure that you go back The Exile by Eric Creek, which Sean has on Kickstarter right now. And
we're also going to have
got our copies of Abolition of Man 2 in the mail, and I've never been happier with the way that something I worked on turned out. It just matched what we were looking for exactly, I think.
Yeah, and we're totally thrilled with that, and hoping people will pick that up. And also very soon we'll have a pre-sale up for Centralia by Miel van de Piet as well. A very, very different but also visually stunning book.
But if you like Moebius, then that's a pretty good. You've referred to Miel van de Piet's art a couple times as YA Moebius, and I think that's exactly right. It's like a little bit more approachable for a younger audience, but that same level of fun design and clean line and intense detail. And so that's going to be an awesome book. Check that out, and thanks for joining us. You're welcome, and or you're sorry for the abbreviated review of Sancho Dint's book. There's a lot of amazing comments that we'll never get to because they were said and now they're lost.
You missed my 5-minute description of a scene from Citizen Kane that's only like 20 seconds in the actual film.
And me talking about the relationship between wrestling and sex.
Right, exactly. Lost the time.
And I won't go into it any further than that.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and let us know what you think in the comments, and we'd love to hear what you guys have been reading. So take care.
Later. Make sure to smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.